Claire wasn't sure if get ready meant put on her game face, brush her teeth, or pack up a lot of weapons, but she followed Shane to say goodbye to Michael first. Michael was standing in the middle of a bunch of hard-looking types, some were vampires, and many she'd never seen before. They didn't look happy about playing defense, and they had that smelling something rotten expression that meant they didn't like hanging out with the human help either. The non-vamps, with Michael, were older, post-college, tough guys with lots of muscles. Even so, the humans mostly looked nervous. Shane seemed almost small in comparison. Not that he let it slow him down as he rushed the defensive line. He pushed a vampire out of his way as he headed for Michael. The vampire flashed fangs at him, but Shane didn't even notice. Michael did. He stepped in the way of the offended vamp as it made a move for Shane's back, and the two of them froze that way, predators facing off. Michael wasn't the one to look down first. Michael had a strange intensity about him now, something that had always been there, but being a vampire had ramped it up to about 11, Claire thought. He still looked angelic, but there were moments when his angel was more fallen than flying. But the smile was real, and completely the Michael she knew and loved when he turned it on them. He held out his hand for a manly kind of shake. Shane batted it aside and hugged him. There were manly backslaps, and if there was a brief flash of red in Michael's eyes, Shane didn't see it. "You be careful, man," Shane said. "Those coloured chicks, they're wild. Don't let them drag you into any jello shot parties. Stay strong." "You too," Michael said. "Be careful. Driving around in a big, black, obvious lunch wagon in a town full of starving vampires? Yeah, I'll try to keep a low profile." Shane swallowed. "Seriously." No, same here." They nodded at each other. Claire and Eve watched them for a moment. The two of them shrugged. "What?" Michael asked. "That's it? That's your big goodbye?" Eve asked. "What was wrong with it?" Claire looked at Eve, mystified. "I think you need guy cliff notes." "Guys aren't deep enough to need cliff notes." "What are you waiting for? Flower poetry?" Shane snorted. "I hugged. I'm done." Michael's grin didn't last. He looked at Shane, then Claire, and last, and longest, at Eve. "Don't let anything happen to you," he said. "I love you guys." "Ditto," Shane said, which was for Shane positively gushing. They might have had time to say more, but one of the vampires standing around, looking pissed off and impatient, tapped Michael on the shoulder. His pale lips moved near Michael's ear. "Time to go," Michael said. He hugged Eve hard and had to peel her off in the end. "Don't trust Oliver." "Yeah, well, you had to tell me that," Eve said. Her voice was shaking again. "Michael, I love you," he said, and kissed her, fast and hard. "I'll see you soon." He left in a blur, taking most of the vampires with him. The mayor's son, Richard Morale, still in his police uniform, although he was looking wrinkled and smoke-stained now, led the humans at a more normal pace to follow. Eve stood there with her kiss-smudged lips parted, looking stunned and astonished. When she regained the power of speech, she said, "Did he just say—" "Yes," Claire said, smiling. "Yes, he did." "Well, guess they better stay alive then." The crowd of people, fewer now than there had been just a few moments before, parted around them, and Oliver strode through the gap. The second most badass vampire in town had shed his costume and was dressed in plain black with a long black leather coat. His long greying hair was tied back in a tight knot at the back of his head, and he looked like he was ready to snap the head off anyone, vampire or human, who got in the way. "You!" he snapped at Eve. "Come." He turned on his heel and walked away. This was not the Oliver they'd known before, certainly not the friendly proprietor of the local coffee shop. Even once he'd been revealed as a vampire, he hadn't been this intense. Clearly he was done pretending to like people. Eve watched him go, and the look in her eyes was boiling with resentment. She finally shrugged and took a deep breath. "Yeah," she said. "This will be so much fun. See you, Claire Bear." "See you," she said. They hugged one last time, just for comfort, and then Eve was leaving, back straight, head high. She was probably crying, Claire thought. Eve cried at times like these. Claire didn't seem to be able to cry when encountered, like now. It felt like pieces of her were being pulled off, and she felt cold and empty inside. No tears. And now it was her heart being ripped out, because Shane was being summoned impatiently by yet another hard-looking bunch of vampires, and humans near the door. He nodded to them, took her hands, and looked into her eyes. "Say it," she thought. But he didn't. He just kissed her hands, turned and walked away, dragging her red, bleeding heart with him. Metaphorically, anyway. I love you, she whispered. She said it before, but he'd hung up the phone before she got it out. Then she'd said it at the hospital, but he'd been doped up on painkillers, and he didn't hear her now, as he walked away from her. But at least she had the guts to try. He waved to her from the door, and then he was gone, and she suddenly felt very alone in the world, and very young. Those who were left in the glass house had jobs of their own, and she was in the way. She found a chair, Michael's armchair, as it turned out, and pulled her feet up under her as humans and vampires moved around, fortifying windows and doors, distributing weapons, fortifying windows, again, and talking in low tones. She might have become a ghost for all the attention they paid her. She didn't have to wait long. In just a few minutes, Amelia came sweeping down the stairs. She had a whole scary bunch of vampires behind her, and a few humans, including 2 in police uniforms. They were all armed. Knives, clubs, swords. Some had stakes, including the policemen. They had them instead of riot batons, hanging from their utility belts. Standard issue equipment for Morganville, Claire thought, and had to suppress a manic giggle. Maybe instead of pepper spray, they have garlic spray. Amelia handed Claire 2 things, a thin silver knife and a wooden stake. A wooden stake in the heart will put one of us down, she said. You must use a silver knife to kill us. No steel, unless you plan to take our heads off with it. The stake alone will not do it, unless you are very lucky or sunlight catches up us helpless. And even then, we are slower to die the older we are. Do you understand? Claire nodded numbly. I'm 16, she wanted to say. I'm not ready for this. But she kind of had to be now. Amelia's fierce, cold expression seemed to soften, just a touch. I can't entrust Bernie to anyone else. When we find him, it will be your responsibility to manage him. He may be... Amelia paused as if searching for the right word. Difficult. That probably wasn't it. I don't want you to fight, but I need you with us. Claire lifted the stake and a knife. Then why'd you give me these? 'Cause you might need to defend yourself. Or him. Or, if you do, I don't want you to hesitate, child. Defend yourself and learn it at all costs. Some of those who come against us may be those you know. Don't let that stop you. We are in this to survive now. Claire nodded numbly. She'd been pretending that all this was some kind of action-adventure video game, like the zombie fighting one Shane enjoyed so much. But with every one of her friends leaving, she'd lost some of that distance. Now it was right here in front of her. Reality. People were dying. She might be one of them. I'll stay close, she said. Amelia's cold fingers touched her chin very lightly. Do that. Amelia turned her attention to the others around them. Watch for my father, but don't be drawn off to face him. It's what he wants. He will have his own reinforcements and will be gathering more. Stay together and watch each other closely. Protect me and protect the child. Could you stop calling me that? Claire asked, Amelia's icy eyes fixed on her in an almost human puzzlement. Child, I mean? I'm not a child. It felt like time stopped for about 100 years while Amelia stared at her. It probably had been at least 100 years since the last time anybody had dared correct Amelia like that in public. Amelia's lips curved very slightly. No, she agreed. You are not a child in any case. By your age, I was a bride and ruled a kingdom. I should know better. Claire felt heat build up in her face. Great. She was blushing as everybody's attention focused on her. Amelia's smile widened. I stand corrected, she said to the rest of them. Protect this young woman. She really didn't feel like that either, but Claire wasn't going to push her luck on that one. The other vampires looked mostly annoyed with the distinction, and the humans looked nervous. Come, Amelia said, and turned to face the blank four wall of the living room. It shimmered like an asphalt road in the summer, and Claire felt the connection snap open. Amelia stepped through what looked like blank wall. After a second or two of surprises, the vampires started to follow her. Man, I can't believe we're doing this, one of the policemen behind Claire whispered to the other. I can, the other whispered back. My kids are out there. What else is there to do? She gripped the wooden stake tight and stepped through the portal, following Amelia. Murney's lab wasn't any more erect than usual. Claire was kind of surprised by that. Somehow she'd expected Bishop to tear through here with torches and clubs, but so far he'd found better targets. Or maybe, just maybe, he hadn't been able to get in. Yet. Claire anxiously surveyed the room, which was lit by just a few flickering lamps, both oil and electric. She tried cleaning it up a few times, but Merlin had snapped at her that he liked things the way they were. So she'd left the stacks of leaning books, the piles of glassware on counters, the disordered piles of curling paper. There was a broken iron cage in the corner, broken because Merlin had decided to escape from it once, and they never got around to having it repaired once he'd regained his senses. The vampires were whispering to one another, in sibilant little hisses that didn't carry even a hint of meaning to Claire's ears. They were nervous too. Amelie, by contrast, seemed as casual and self-assured as ever. She snapped her fingers, and two of the vampires, big, strong, strapping men, stepped up, towering over her. She glanced up. "You will guard the stairs," she said. "You two?" She pointed to the uniformed police. "I want you here as well. Guard the interior doors. I doubt anything will come through them, but Mr. Bishop has already surprised us. I won't have him surprising us again." That cut their forces in half. Claire swallowed hard and looked at the two vampires and one human who remained with her and Amelie. She knew the two vampires slightly. They were Amelie's personal bodyguards, and one of them, at least, had treated her kind and decently before. The remaining human was a tough-looking African-American woman with a scar across her face. From her left temple across her nose and down her right cheek, she saw Claire watching her and gave her a smile. "Hey," she said, and stuck out a big hand. "Hannah Moses." Moses' garage. "Hey," Claire said, and shook hands awkwardly. The woman had muscles. Not quite Shane quality biceps, but definitely bigger than most women would have found useful. "You're a mechanic?" "I'm an everything," Hannah said. "Mechanic included, but I used to be a Marine." "Oh," Claire blinked. "The garage was my dad's before he passed. I just got back from a couple of tours in Afghanistan. Thought I'd take up the quiet life for a while." She shrugged. "Guess trouble's in my blood. Look, if this comes to a fight, stay with me, okay? I'll watch your back." That was so much of a relief that Claire felt weak enough to melt. "Thanks. No problem." "You're what, about 15? "Almost 17. Claire thought she needed a t-shirt that said it for her. It would be a great time saver. That, or some kind of button. "Huh. So you're about my kid brother's age." "His name's Leo. I'll have to introduce you sometime." Hannah, Claire realised, was talking without really thinking about what she was saying. Her eyes were focused on Amelie, who had made her way around piles of books to the doorway on the far wall. Hannah didn't seem to miss anything. "Claire," Amelie said. Claire dodged piles of books and came to her side. "Did you lock this door when you left before?" "No, I thought I'd be coming back this way." "Interesting. Because someone has locked it." "Merlin?" Amelie shook her head. "Bishop has him. He has not returned this way." Claire decided not to ask how she knew that. Who else? And she knew who. Jason. Eve's brother had known about the doorways that led to different destinations in town. Maybe not about how they worked, and Claire wasn't sure she did either, but he definitely had figured out how to use them. Apart from Claire, Merlin and Amelie, only Oliver had the knowledge, and she knew where he'd been since her encounter with Mr. Bishop. "Yes," Amelie agreed. "The boy is becoming a problem." Kind of an understatement, considering he, try that again. Kind of an understatement, considering he, Claire mimed stabbing with the stake, but not in Amelie's direction. That would be like pointing a loaded gun at Superman. Somebody would get hurt, and it wouldn't be Superman. I meant to ask, are you..." Amelie looked away from her, towards the door. "Am I what? Okay?" Because she'd had a stake in her chest not all that long ago, and beside that, all the vampires in Morganville had a disadvantage, whether they knew it or not. They were sick, really sick, with something Claire could only think of a vampire Alzheimer's, and it was ultimately fatal. Most of the town didn't have a clue about that, because Amelie was rightly afraid of what might happen if they did. Vampires, humans alike. Amelie had symptoms, but so far they were mild. It took years to progress, so they were safe for a while. At least, Claire hoped it took years. "No, I doubt I'm all right. Still, this is hardly the time to be coddling myself." Amelie focused on the door. "We will need the key to open it." That was a problem, because the key wasn't where it was supposed to be. The key ring was gone from where Claire kept it, in a battered, sagging drawer and the more Claire poured through debris looking for it, the more alarmed she became. Merlin kept the weirdest stuff. Books, sure. She loved books. Small deformed dead things and alcohol? Not so much. He also kept jars of dirt. At least she hoped it was dirt. Some of it looked red and flaky, and she was really afraid it might be blood. The keys were missing. So were a few other things. Significant things. With a sinking feeling, Claire pulled open the half-broken drawer where she'd kept the bag with all the tranquilizer stuff, and Merlin's drug supplies. Gone. Only a scrape in the dust to indicate where it had been. That meant that when Merlin turned violent, she wouldn't have her trusty dart gun to help her. Nor would she have even her trusty injectable pen. So cool that she'd loaded up for emergencies, because it had been in the bag with the drugs. She'd lost the other supplies she had with her. But even worse, she didn't have any medicine for him, other than the couple of small vials she had with her in her pockets. In summary, so very screwed. Enough, Amelie said, and turned to her bodyguard. I know this isn't easy, but if you would... He gave her a polite sort of nod, stepped forward and took the lock in his hands. His hand burst into flame. Oh my God, Claire blurted, and clapped her hands over her mouth, because the vampire guy wasn't letting go. His face was contorted with pain, but he held on, somehow, and jerked and twisted the silver-plated lock until, with a scream of metal, it ripped loose. The hasp came with it, right off the door. He dropped it to the floor, his hand kept burning. Claire grabbed the first thing that came to hand, some kind of ratty old shirt Merlin had left thrown on the floor, and patted out the fire. The smell of burnt flesh made her dry heave, and so did the sight of what was left of his hand. He didn't scream. She almost did it for him. A trap, Amelie said. From my father. Gerard, are you able to continue? He nodded as he wrapped the shirt around the ruin of his hand. He was sweating fine pink beads of blood. Claire realised as a trickle of it ran down his pale face. She realised that as she was standing there right in front of him, frozen in place, and his eyes flashed red. Move, he growled at her. Stay behind us. And then after a brief pause, he said, Thank you. Anna took her by the arm and pulled her to the spot on the back, out of a vampire-grabbing range. He needs feeding, she said in an undertone. Gerard's not a bad guy, but you don't want to make yourself too available for snack attacks. Remember, we're vending machines with legs. Claire nodded. Amelia put her fingers in the hole left by the broken lock and pulled the door open. On darkness. Hannah said nothing. She let go of Claire's arm. For a long moment, nothing happened, and then a darkness flickered, shifted. Things came and went in the shadows, and Claire knew that Amelia was shuffling destinations, trying to find the one she wanted. It seemed to take a very long time, and then Amelia took a sudden step back. Now! She said, and her two bodyguards charged forward into what looked like a complete darkness and were gone. Amelia glanced back at Hannah and Claire, and her blank pupils were expanding fast, covering all the grey iris of her eyes, preparing for the dark. Don't leave my side, she said. This will be dangerous.
Hello everyone, thank you for listening to the audio file or audio reading I've done of a Rachel Kane book. I'm putting this in there, so if you want to skip past this bit and move on to the next video, that's fine by me. This is just like a cancer plug, because I want to do this, as well as also I have to do this, because the thing you've just listened to is illegal for me to do without having a charity case behind it, which I don't want it to be like a situation like, oh, I'm only doing this for the sake of cancer, which I'm actually doing this for the sake of cancer, but I did cancel this series a long time ago. It came to my recent attention that I should redo this in a better format, and I feel like now is a perfect opportunity to actually restart this in the worst possible way. Back in 1st of November, back in 2020, Rachel Kane sadly passed away to a rare bone cancer called sarcoma. Now, in the description below is going to be a link that you can... It's going to be a link so you can support the research into helping people survive and defeat sarcoma bone cancer and soft tissue cancer cells and all that stuff. So that's just going to be in the description right there down below. It is in pounds for those American ones, but obviously PayPal and all the research still goes to the same thing, because once it's been cured, once they found a cure for it or found an easier solution for it and stuff like that, it does get sent around all around the world, because everyone works on the same thing. all over the world. It's just that this charity is based in UK. I live in the UK, so it still goes to the same goal to beat sarcoma for a long time, and I feel like this is the best opportunity to work with it for any Rachel King books that we do during the Morganville series or any future series that we do. Obviously, this is even going to be in the future series if we do them. So any book that we do by Rachel King is going to have this at the end, just to plug a little bit of a cancer support for people with sarcoma, because it is a rare cancer, and there is not a very good survival rate. So just putting that in there to help people or to support the issues that are out there, because I'm not going to get any money from these videos at all, even in like the present one. I'm not getting any money of this recording, or in the future, if possibly I do. But this is not what I'm about. This is all about for what Rachel King succumbed to in the end. So hopefully that as a team together we can beat sarcoma and end one of the cancers that are killing people, because no one likes that. But anyway, have a good day.